What does that mean?
Live 001. Facebook
Cool.
is recording.
Hey, g'day everyone. It's great to see you tonight. Well, actually we can't see you, but hopefully you can see us. And according to our very experienced technical director tonight, we are online and ready to go. Hope your Friday has been good at the end of a good week. It's certainly been a very special week for us at Connect Church New Zealand. No matter what location you are a part of, we have come to the end of a pretty large and long journey of faith, and some of you will be aware that next Tuesday we are meant to be taking possession of our new HQ here in Timaru that has enabled us to move in with all of our office spaces and all of that, about 800 square metres of office space, meeting rooms, all of that kind of stuff, with a further 800 square metres of warehouse to develop, as well as another 800 squares of land to develop. That we have the opportunity to do so. So really, really exciting. And yeah, actually we found out, Pastor Paul, our executive pastor, and myself went to the lawyers yesterday to sign off on the details, and found out that actually we were settling today. And so just before coming around here to catch up with Mum tonight and have this conversation with you, I was able to pick up a key. And so we have access, and as of about 4 o'clock this afternoon, the title deed of 44 to 46A Rothwell Street is now the property of Connect Church New Zealand, which is incredibly exciting. And like we said, when we got together on Sunday last week, Mum, and we were able to talk to the people that, you know, so often the moments that are worth celebrating are more the result of a journey than an instant kind of process. And for some of the people in Timaru, being part of the Timaru congregation even longer than I have, the church is nearly 39 years old and never owned anything. Wow. Other than a few chairs and the odd computer and maybe an OHP from time to time with a few slides and a digital projector. And today we take hold of something significant, obviously not just for Timaru, but wider Connect, but certainly been part of a journey, a lot of scary walking on water moments. There's been times even in our journey as a church where, you know, it looked like maybe this kind of a day would never come, where actually all of the circumstances and finances and all of that were all upside down and around the wrong way. And but today's a pretty special moment, so I just wanted to share that with you, the outset of our time together, and it kind of fits. Just going to put that key down here so people can get excited.
I can't believe a key costs that much.
Yeah, that's true. It's a very expensive key. Don't lose it. Yeah, just been amazing, and you really do at the end of a journey rather than a moment. Feel such a deep sense of satisfaction. And like we said, I think that was one of my closing comments when you and I chatted the other week, was that so often the things that matter in life come at a significant cost, or those things that are really valuable cost us a lot. And do you think that's true?
I do, and I think sometimes on the outside looking in, people like the result. Like, hey, I want that. But, you know, they haven't done like you, that probably this maybe sleepless nights, and that, you know, this is a big ask, and, you know, where's the money going to come from? And, you know, that they feel like the ability to carry it and not give up. You know, we want the outcome, but we don't always want that hanging in there, and, you know, when it doesn't seem like it's going to happen and everything's pressing against you. Those are bits people don't see.
One of the most established lines at Connect is claim the promise but commit to the process. And so often we just want the promise without the pain and the cost of the process. And so this is exciting. It's just another signpost of God's faithfulness. We'll talk about it heaps more as a church in terms of the building, but there's just such a strong sense in my heart over this season, and from wherever you're watching around New Zealand tonight, whether it's I know some of our youth groups are going to be plugging in from around Timaru, and obviously others from our other locations. But just the sense that God is calling us out to a real fresh sense, a real clear call, but a real fresh sense of God wanting to form real faith in us, a faith that is not dependent on our circumstances. And as we kind of, I guess, reconnect again tonight, Mum, and we often talk, but as we allow others to eavesdrop on our conversation tonight, we're coming into a season that's going to require a little bit of faith because, when we were together last time, we talked about masks, we talked about those things that we can often put on, and this is going to be a time as we find ourselves with a bit of increasing freedom, come like next level of level 2, we've found a greater release. We'll be gathering as a church next week. Some of those cool freedoms that are coming our way, but people are going to be having a bit of a storm inside. They're going to be finding that the new normal or the old normal isn't the same as it was. There's going to have to be a finding a new normal. There's going to be kind of some storms going on in people's worlds, and we need to keep in mind as we go into our discussion tonight to answer questions and address some of the stuff that people have put to us. And we've got a couple of questions now, but if you're watching right now, why don't you chuck some questions? Doesn't really matter too much on the topic, but hopefully you saw last week when we were talking about kind of the process of the internal process that we go on as God changes us, and he often strips back before he rebuilds.
Sure does.
But as we talk about that tonight, we want to make sure that we ground that in a faith-filled perspective, and we don't need to be afraid of change. We don't need to be afraid of what the new normal will look like, because one, we have the promise of Christ's presence with us, that he is with us even to the end of the age, and we might not be prosperity gospel people where everything's great all the time, but we certainly have a strong belief in the faithfulness of God to do what he said he's going to do, and his promises that he would never leave us, that he would never forsake us, and that he is kind of the big figure in this equation. Yeah. Did you have anything to add to that while I read some?
Well, I was just thinking about what you're saying there, and I think often, when there's change like this and we don't know what it's going to look like, we can get quite anxious, and that's because we're trying to work it all out from a perspective of not knowing. And the Bible says sufficient today is the evil thereof, and sometimes we try and see too far ahead. We try and plan things or control things that we can't control. And so really important, in any time of change, and I'm kind of experiencing that myself. Like, I think I quite like the new normal, but I don't like it as well. It's brought some things that are good, but it's brought other things that are not so good.
I feel exactly the same.
It's kind of weird, and it's like, do I want to step out again, or do I like this but I'm not satisfied with where I am? It's not enough, but it's scary to step back into that. So definitely. I think around anxiety, I think is just, if we can just focus on what's right in front of us and not try and work everything out and be 10 steps ahead. I think that's a real key thing in just being able to, calm some of that anxiety around things that we actually cannot control.
Very good. Hey, we'll jump into some of these questions,
Okay.
And we've got one here from, someone sent in this question. I said that their question would be, how do we continue to create new habits for ourselves? Like you said, you like it and you don't like it. You've found some positives and some negatives, and I guess this question leans into probably some of the positive aspects of that, where we've had some clarity around some things that are probably, we've done some weeding, we've probably taken some things that are not beneficial for us, and we've found some things that are beneficial. How could we take those beneficial things into our new normal? So the question reads like this: how do we continue to create new habits for ourselves, transitioning out of lockdown and into the busyness of life? How do we maintain balance and rest and making time to process alone, as well as kind of reintegrating or socializing with friends and family?
Mate, that's the $10 million question, isn't it? Now.
You should write a book. If you can write a book about that, you'll make a lot of money.
Yeah, I don't think we can answer that one in 2 minutes. I mean, there's so many aspects to that question. One is about balance, isn't it? Holding on to the good. Some of those things. And I guess for me, I'm thinking about moving back into that. I often have found, and probably you can attest to this, anyone who's watching, is that when pressure comes on, the first thing that we give up are the things that are good for us.
That's true. That's definitely true.
Like the disciplines, the things that we know do us good, like finding time to exercise, eating well, those things, having a routine. Quiet times, all those things, they usually, if we come under pressure, the first things we give up usually are those self-care things. Those things that actually are good for us. And so if we were to condense that question into something that's answerable in a forum like this, is maybe, hold on to those things that are good. hold on to those things that are valuable, make them a priority, because sometimes we say we're time poor, but sometimes we're not always good stewards of that time either.
Yeah, someone said this to me about that we are not, actually Paul DeYoung actually said it from Life Church, he said, we are not time poor, we are distraction rich.
Yes. Yeah.
And I that's always just stuck with me. I've quoted that so many times. I probably heard it 12 years ago. But it's like,
it's true.
It so keeps being true about my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you talk about like putting, if we were to land that at a real practical level, it's like we've got this new normal, it's got a capacity, say like a jar, like a preserving jar. Preserving jar is your life and your capacity. And there's the kind of that saying that says, put the big stones in first. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, unpack that analogy, just so that's practical and has feet on it for people?
Yeah. Okay, I mean, this is going to be different for everybody, but these are, the big stones are really the not negotiables in your world, whatever they are. If you're a provider for your family, if you've got a position of leadership, for us as believers, our relationship with God is one of those big anchoring things that go on. But, like self-care has got to be one of those big stones as well, because as I say, that's usually the one that we try and jam into everything else, and then we wonder why we kind of don't have the capacity to keep coping. I often say to people, we wouldn't run our car on empty. We'd think it crazy, wouldn't we? To go get in our car and drive from here to Christchurch with no fuel. Yeah. We'd say that's insane. Yeah. But this is how we run our lives. Yes. Often on empty, because we don't have those big absolute things in place. Yeah. And so everything else seems to just filter through. Yeah. Remember somebody saying once, so important that we set our agenda, because if we don't, somebody else will. Yeah. It's really important that we take control of those things that are really important to us, and we hold boundaries around those so that they're not eroded by, there's a difference between the urgent and the important. Yeah. Those big stones are the really important things, and yet other things can come in and take our time, energy and attention away from those things. Yeah. And that's been a real key thing for me, is okay, is this urgent or is it important? Yeah. It feels urgent, it feels important, but actually it's not. Yeah. These other things, holding these other things is actually far more important. Yeah. Because they're going to keep me for the longevity.
I like what you said about if we don't set it, others will set it for us. And as a kind of a phrase that I would use in my kind of leadership spheres, and we talk about culture, or the theme of the feel of a community or organisation, it would say the culture will either be set by design or by default. Right. And I think that would be true of an agenda, a personal agenda is like you can design it and pre-decide how that's going to look and what's going to be prioritised, or you can just essentially see what happens. But inevitably something will happen, the time will get filled. Yes. And even going back to that analogy of a jar as a life with capacity and putting the big stones, of course, the analogy goes on to you put in the big stones and then you put in the pebbles, and so that fits around the big stones, and then you kind of put the sand in last, which fills all the cracks. But so often we put the sand in, we put some pebbles in, we're like, man, we just can't even get one big stone in here. Right. And one, if you pack it right, you can get a lot more in. Absolutely. But two, we just so often end up just doing the things that matter the most and putting them at the end and going, oh man, my life is so full, I actually haven't got time for Jesus. Or I haven't got time for my relationship with my spouse. Or I haven't got time to intentionally spend time with my children. I haven't got time to go for that walk or go for that run, like you were saying, the gym or whatever. Man, I think that's common to all of us. I don't like talking about this kind of stuff because I feel like I've had some wins, but I don't always win on this stuff. And there's a real challenge. But do you believe that there's a real opportunity in this season for us to do that?
I do, but I also know that coming back to a little bit what we talked about last time, if people pleasing is our motivation, if this is the hook that keeps us living a chaotic life, then we miss opportunities anyway. It doesn't matter what season we're in. We're not actually being able to maximize any opportunities. Yeah. Because all of our agendas and all of our energy is going into perhaps other people's agendas rather than God's, or
Yeah.
And you'll remember times, when we were in ministry, when my life was completely out of whack.
Yeah.
Completely out of whack.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I
not dead.
Didn't know, but was kind of, it was so important to have the affirmation of other people that I would set my own important things aside, like my own family, to go and, if someone was unhappy, I thought, well, they're lonely, I have to go and be with them, and so a lot of that came from, and it just made my life chaotic.
So that's the sand and first, right?
Absolutely.
And so the big rocks of your family or whatever just didn't
didn't fit. Yeah. Because we only have so much energy, and then we wonder why we're constantly exhausted and not achieving anything.
Yeah.
Because we're actually just running in sand.
Yeah. I just want to, we'll move on to another question, but I want to just say on that to anyone who's watching either live or delayed, that Mum says that, but I want to give you hope. If you've reassessed some things in this season and you're going, actually, I'm not being the parent I want to be or whatever, there is absolutely hope, because Mum's saying there that she didn't always make family the priority, or maybe some of those things didn't get in the place they needed to get in. But I am a product of my parents' home. And, for me, the thing that, for those of you just even wondering around ministry or all of that stuff, it's right that we should reassess, make sure that our priorities are right and we have a healthy process. But very much what I am doing today is a result of what you've formed me in. And so I just want to say that, because some people out there might be going, oh, we've done it all wrong, or you know what I mean, we've spoiled it, or we've ruined it, or we've, it's all, it's beyond fixing because it's been too long, our kids are too damaged, or whatever. And actually isn't like that, because this is where we need the grace of God. And for me, the thing that I remember most, and actually, I'm intentional about that when you say that, because for me, the greatest witness, and I'd say my sister, for those of you who don't know, we're a two-child family, and my sister's over in Europe, and but we would regularly talk about and agree that the thing that we got most from our home is there was something more important than just us, which was the kingdom of God, which is probably the loudest sound that came out of our childhood. And both of us significantly wire our time and resources around the building of the kingdom because of your example. So be encouraged that actually, even my parents, who I think are incredible, would say, hey, we didn't always get that right. And so if you're one of those parents feeling right now you haven't always got that right, be encouraged. God hasn't finished with your kids, he hasn't finished with you, and you just don't know what's going to happen with that.
And there's no perfect parent.
There isn't. I can tell you, she wasn't perfect. I promise you. I can tell you.
And I can attest to not being perfect.
Yeah. And I even helped her at the time by telling her. In fact, that was most of my teenage years. From what I understand it. But
I'm going to need trauma counselling if we go
there.
I've lost my train of thought now.
Sorry, you're reliving the trauma.
No, I was going to say something quite
We were talking about people haven't mucked up. There's still hope. You never know.
Oh, yes. I remember going to a parenting seminar once, and the guy said, don't all go home feel like you've been really bad parents. He said, because actually your mistakes is what builds resilience in your children.
Yeah, wow.
If you helicopter parent and your children never experience anything unpleasant, or they have no confrontation or no distress in their life, or no disagreements or anything, they grow up with absolutely no resilience. So you can thank me for your resilience.
Well, I'm incredibly resilient. That explains why I'm bulletproof. Thanks for that armor that you gave me.
So it just shows that God actually. He redeems it, and he uses those things. Even the things that the enemy would use for harm, God uses for good.
He does.
And I love that my kids, it modeled something. For me, I guess it was only coming out of it, I began to understand the motivation.
Right.
So on the outside, we said last time, it can look exactly the same, but the motivation.
Yeah, which means that even when we do kind of with the right heart, sometimes we're doing the wrong thing. But that doesn't mean that because that's something that we're going to have to work through later on as God takes us on a journey of rightly building us and establishing us, that some of that stuff is still going to have a good effect on people. It's still going to actually be a blessing, and we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater there. No. It was interesting you say about, the parenting seminar you went to, and, don't go home feeling like bad parents. I was sitting in one of the movements that I work with, I literally flew in to do a couple of sessions with a whole lot of emerging leaders in a movement, and the session before me was a minister from the UK who'd come over, and he had done a session, and I just managed to catch it, but on relationships, and his message was entitled "How to Have a Slightly Better Marriage." And I just thought he was an incredibly talented communicator, but he just said, I want to get up there, and he said, you might be surprised by my title, but he said the problem is people get up, especially in Christian circles, and he was saying, kind of, I'd say American Christianity, that was the word he used, but I don't mean that every Christian in America would see that, but the kind of that polished, everything looks Barbie and Ken, certainly televised American Christianity. And he was saying they've all written these books on how to have a perfect marriage, but he said 5 years later they're not married anymore. But he was saying sometimes we actually just need to fight for a slightly better marriage, because that improves our lives and our kids' lives and all of that stuff. And so instead of sitting there going, we need to be perfect and measuring ourselves against perfect, sometimes, especially if we're embracing a journey narrative, then actually we just need to take the next step and just be a little bit more faithful next week than we were last week with our time and our priorities, and then build on the win of that, build on the bit with that. And I thought, what an uninspiring yet completely enlightening title, How to Have a Slightly Better Marriage. And he said, if everyone had a slightly better marriage, there'd be a whole lot less guilt and a whole lot more productivity and a whole lot more happy people.
And I mean, that raises something that I was just mentioning to you before. Comparisons. This is what we do. We look at people and we judge their lives from what we see on the outside. And I remember watching a program once about a village vicar, and it must have been a priest or something, and people used to go into confession. And he came out and said, for goodness sake, I wish these people would just talk to each other, because they're all struggling with exactly the same thing. But on the outside, we look at people and say, wow, look at them. Look what they've got. And I was out biking today, and I was really giving it my best shot. And then this guy passed me, and straight away I compared and thought, oh, he's making me look bad. I need to up my game. I need to be doing better at this. I was doing everything that I could. I was doing the best that I could. And then I was going up Waiheke Road, and there was a lady on a bike going really slow, and I passed her, and suddenly I felt really good about myself. And I thought, this is crazy. This is what we do. And 1 minute, one set of circumstances causes me to feel this way, and then another set of circumstances, and I feel this way. It's actually not about that. The fact that I was out there on my bike today in the sun was a good thing. But as soon as we start getting into comparisons, we start beating ourselves up, or we get prideful and go, oh, well, at least I'm faster than her.
A couple of one-liners that speak to that. This one, contentment ends where comparison begins.
Yes, that's true.
Contentment ends where comparison begins. And if we're formed in the right story, the story of kingdom, then we actually realize that, like the Apostle Paul would encourage us, he said, I have learned to be content in every situation. You can't be content and comparing at the same time. And so comparison is so destructive. The second one was a quote from Craig Groeschel off his leadership podcast. And he said this, comparison is toxic, because it either creates a feeling of inferiority, the faster person on the bike, or superiority, the slower person on the bike. And he said neither of those are Christian.
No.
To feel less than someone or to feel better than someone, neither of those feelings are Christian.
Wow. But it also says that we take our worth from external things too. That's totally what we're against, or not against, but you know what I mean. That's totally not the gospel. Our sense of worth comes from our relationship with God, and we're anchored in that. And so those other external things, what David Riddell would say, if we give people the power to determine our worth and value, we also give them the power to take it away. And that's totally, isn't it? As long as we've got these external things feeding into us, whether it's that altruistic behaviour we've talked about, or whether it's addictions or anything else, anything that we pursue to give us that is destructive. Because I can feel bad 1 minute and good the next, or good 1 minute and bad the next, and that's not living that consistent, balanced,
Yeah, well, that's us when we need external. That's why Christianity is about an internal transformation, because we anchor on the rock of Christ. You know, the wise man builds the house on the rock, and the sand. If we build our lives on sand, say in our context, in our day and age, that would be to base our identity based on the affirmation of others. That would be the sand of a life. And actually, I talk about this in leadership circles. You know, when we look to get from people what we should only get from God, we make our worst decisions. When we actually look to get that stuff, because all of a sudden we begin to go, actually, I need that affirmation. Oh, but when I behave like that, I get that affirmation. Or when I express love to the person on the opposite sex with physical attention, then I get that affirmation when I do that. And, you know, that pretty much attributes, that dynamic would attribute to 90% of the pastoral work that we do, is that people have put their identity in the hands of the wrong things and the wrong people. Yeah.
That would be my experience in counselling as well.
Yeah.
Many people come in with a very, very poor sense of self, but I'm kind of like, well, who died and made those big people in your life? God.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they're broken vessels who are, you know, they're not whole themselves. So how can they judge
on the
you?
journey themselves.
What do you know, my saying is, we judge we're imperfect people judging other imperfect people to be imperfect.
Yeah.
But how do we give these people who are broken so much power to determine our worth and value? And if we don't revisit that, we often carry it right into our adult life.
And then we jump into what you talked about when we talked the other week about having a victim mentality, or you had another name for it?
Learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness, where we can begin to then project all of the bad things on our life on someone else. It's someone else's fault. They should have done it. They did the wrong thing when I gave them.
I can't do anything about it. This is just my life. It always goes. It doesn't matter what I do. I always end up in the same place. You can almost feel that sort of kind of
We've got actually quite a few questions coming through, so we probably need to move forward.
Cool.
But one of them is not so much a question, but your granddaughter, Grace, has said that we need to say hi to girls group. So hi to the girls group tonight in Timaru, of which Grace is a part. It's nice to see you.
Hi guys.
And great to have you in with us. So big shout out to you guys.
Yeah.
I want to jump into a question that will from someone who shall remain anonymous, but Jamie asks this question. And
Hi,
he says this. It's disappeared off my screen here.
Want me to read it?
Telling me there's 16 comments, but it's not showing me them all.
Jamie Chapman, what are the harmful signs that could...
Could you read that out? We've got a wonderful producer behind the camera, so if you'd like to read that out loudly, that would be great.
What are the harmful signs that could signal to us we are staying too isolated in a season where we could or should be reconnecting back into the community?
Wow, so he's saying, how do we deal with, I guess, for some people, and I think this crosses over with another question that we had for those who are fearful at this time, or those who are perhaps, you know, will be hesitant to re-engage, or perhaps have just discovered they love their own company at this time and go, actually, this was a pretty good life, just me doing my own thing. And it's actually nice. I don't have to deal with everyone else's baggage, and it's just me, and you know, I've got my own little bubble going on. What would you say to people who would perhaps be hesitant to re-engage, and maybe what would be some of the implications of staying isolated?
What did Nike say? Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we just did that this week. We were feeling a bit like that. We've just been in a bubble most of the time, just the two of us. And I said to David, you know, I think we need to invite somebody around for dinner, because it's actually not healthy if we stay like this. And then there's days where you feel down because you've got no social interaction. And so, you know, you've almost got to push yourself past that sort of you would have done really normally. It would have just come so easy to you. We've almost sort of got to crank ourselves up. Not in a try harder, but actually, I guess one of those rocks, those things that we know that are important, is social connection and having friends and showing kindness. You can't do that in isolation.
No, you can't.
You can't. You know, we talk about being kind to each other, or you know, do something for somebody. You can't do that in isolation. So Christianity doesn't work like that. And so, you know, and we did that the other night. We had 2 couples around, and I think we've both probably sort of avoided like, oh, you know, this is just like, it's just too hard. But afterwards, it was like, well, that was such a good thing to do.
Yeah.
That's
it's like going to the gym. I
Yes.
never feel like going, but I'm always glad I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, it's those things that are good for us that we seem to be reluctant to push through, whether it's going for a bike ride or going to the gym or having people over or, you know, picking up the phone and making a call and not liking the phone right now because I do a lot of work on the phone, so that feels like work now instead of ringing my friends and, you know, having a conversation. And so, but then I've got to be able to say, okay, how do I recalibrate this? If I keep doing what I've been doing for the last 8 weeks, nothing's going to change. So it's about sort of stepping out of that or out of that discomfort, or probably both out and into that discomfort. And saying, okay, what do I want my life to look like? What were the good things about pre-COVID lockdown that enriched my life? And you know, how do I take steps to actually start integrating those back in, even though it feels uncomfortable? Just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah, very good.
We've formed a habit, haven't we? Those 8 weeks.
Yeah, the gym's uncomfortable, but it's not wrong.
Yeah, and like even getting dressed to go to work, perhaps I won't.
No.
I've had an ensemble, a COVID ensemble.
Yeah, which is just half an outfit. Pajama pants and a nice sweater.
Nightie and dressing gown.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the other day it was like, I actually have to be somewhere at a certain time and I have to put something decent on. Like it felt like a hassle actually. You know, but you get in and you do it and it's like, okay, I remember this feeling. This feels a bit normal again.
Yes.
So it's like anything when we're trying to change it, we just have to persist in those areas until it feels more normal. Because going into lockdown felt incredibly abnormal.
Yes, it did. A lot of change enforced upon us. More than probably you'll see in a lifetime, probably for a generation. That there's this much change, and it was enforced change, and it was all that stuff. It took a while to calibrate too, and then it's like, this. You know, there's some good things here. There's some things that, are removing some of a lot of the tensions in my life, and some of them were healthy tensions, and so getting them back. And I know for me, I was feeling a bit up in the air at the end of probably the last couple of weeks, and I realised that actually for me, I think that although there's been a lot of challenges with COVID, there's a busyness to my life that I really miss, and I don't necessarily think that's unhealthy. And sometimes in this world where we're either not aware enough about our own boundaries, or sometimes we sit there and some people that don't have a lot on are freaking out about their boundaries and going, I need to rest more. You know, and so busyness becomes a bad word, but there's a level of busyness, there's a healthy stress level that I've missed. I feel like they've been, I'm a people person. I love to pioneer, I love to problem solve and lead and communicate and connect with people, and I've become just an ultra busy administrator. And the kind of ministry I'd normally be doing to people, I'm doing to a camera, and none of that is either normal. I'm going to say normal, or similar to that other work, really. And so I've felt like my emotions going a bit haywire and feeling a little bit emo, probably. In that space. But for me, that question from Jamie is a deeply theological question. Well, it has deeply theological implications, and I think the longer that I minister, the longer that I've been pastoring and working with our core team, and just the privilege of dealing with people and their journeys, the more and more I believe, I'm beginning to believe what the early church, one of the early church fathers would say. He was one of the desert fathers, and he said this: one Christian is no Christian. One Christian is no Christian. And we've believed that kind of Christianity is the script that we memorize, that we could do 5 steps to the cross, whatever it is, and we can do that, and that's our Christianity. And you can actually put that in a file, but actually the Christian life, or the life to be a citizen of the kingdom, is a lived reality, and it has to be lived in community. And so we don't just decide to go to a church because it fits our consumer needs. I really want good teaching and I really want this kind of worship or whatever. But we actually got saved into a family, and it's in that family that we mature together, just like children who would do that. It's like learning to fight. The arguments leads them to learn to communicate, and they get consequences instead of communicating if they hit, and they do all that stuff. And in a sense, the church is a bigger iron sharpens iron, one sharpens another. And so I think I personally, as a pastor, one of my big concerns is that people go, oh, this has all just been it nice, staying home, staying in bed, put my pajamas on, put church on, and you realise that what's coming through the TV isn't church. No. It's just an encouraging program. But church is when you actually, you know, the way that the essence of our faith is the way that you worship Messiah, the way that you worship Jesus, the way that you worship the God we know in Jesus is by serving and loving others. That's how he wants his sacrifices. Yes. It's love. Every time we love at our own cost, that's sacrifice. And you can't do that in isolation. Your world becomes very small, becomes inwardly focused, and then we think we're spiritually mature because over that time we managed to memorize another 30 verses, but we haven't lived any of them. Yeah. And that's conversations that I've had. Oh, Dad, you know, I remember one of our kids asking, what's the most, I've learned some memory verses. Which one would you like to hear? And I said, the one that you've learnt to live out. And they looked at me blankly, and I was like, well, they're no good to you if you haven't actually learn to action them, and all of them have community expression. So that would be my take on that question. My computer's not doing what it should. Would our beautiful assistant David be prepared to give us another one there?
I was just thinking the other day, I was sort of feeling a bit flat, just having one of those days and just not in a good headspace, and then the next day I made a decision to do something for somebody, and I said to David at the end of that day, I said, oh, I feel much better today, and he said, do you think that's because you actually did something for somebody else today? Yeah. I was like, yes, that could be part of it. Yes, like, because we need to live with purpose and passion, don't we? Yeah. And without purpose and passion, it's just mundane. It's like a hamster on a wheel, isn't it? Yeah. There's no sense of there being any, what's the point? Yeah. And we've got to remember too, I don't see demons under every rock. We've got to remember that we have an enemy too, and he would love to see the church dissipate at this point, where comfort becomes our God again, where we're like, oh, well, this is just so easy. I don't have to put in any effort. You know, all my needs are being met. I'm actually just fine. Because if we remember, you know, it actually isn't about us. It's about a lost community. It's about a God who came to save that community. Yeah, incarnational, put his privilege behind and came and rolled up his sleeves and got into it. So if comfort was our God, then that's fine. We've achieved what we, you know, what we set out to wish, but that's not our God. Yeah. Which is like why we naturally, certainly in the West, when comfort and safety are our values, we love to consume the work of the cross, but we're not really good at imitating the example to the cross. Yeah. But actually, we are being disciples when we follow the Christ, not when we consume, become consumers of his work. And so it's actually when we're in the middle of it and someone's offending us and we're going, forgive them, Lord, they know not what they do. I'm not going to judge their motives, and I'm going to have my identity anchored in you, and I'm not going to just get the pip with everyone around me, and I'm not going to be the easiest offended person, and I'm not going to go back and jump into my self-enabled helplessness or the victim mentality or whatever it's called. Learned helplessness, you know, and jump back into the same old destructive cycles. I'm part of a community where people care about me enough to have those honest conversations with me and say, man, I'm concerned about this, or I'm concerned about that. We have to make sure we get trusted people in on those roles, because some people are more interested in being those voices in others' lives than doing the process themselves. Enabling. But there was a good one, I think, from there was a question there to our beautiful producer about what advice you give someone that knows they need to go on a journey.
I've got it here.
Thank you.
I really wanted to ask you what you suggest for Christians who know they need to go through a difficult process to experience true wholeness through Jesus, but you have commitments, e.g. parenting. How do you go through something you know will take energy and time and be messy, yet uphold the life you have to maintain?
Wow. Well, again, a huge question. Somebody's got an awareness that they need to go on a journey, but they're also going into this with their eyes wide open. I say to people, this is not for the faint-hearted. You know, you need to know that this is going to get tough, so that whoever's asked this question is aware that this is going to be something that's going to take time and energy. And so, you know, there is a time in our lives. I think God's timing is a good thing to acknowledge. And also, like we alluded to before, and I think about what my kids went through, and I can think of somebody else who I've done a journey with over a few years, and was very, very concerned that them being seemingly unraveled would do harm to their children.
Yeah.
But actually, they were so blown away by comments from the children who saw the change unfolding.
Yeah.
The progress that was being made in the parent. And I said, you're actually modeling to your children that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And that you can come through it, and that even though life can be difficult, again, there's that resilience thing again.
Yeah.
We fear that if we are not, that perfect parent thing again, if I'm not able to be physically present, emotionally present, hovering over their every need, somehow these children are going to be damaged.
Yeah.
But actually it seems to be that the flip side of that is that, like you said, we understood that there was more that it wasn't just about us. It kind of gave us a different perspective. And this client that I'm thinking about, it was like, wow, this is growing something in my children.
Yeah.
That had I not gone through this process, probably actually would have done more damage.
Yes. Well, and this is the other thing. When we've got our masks on, we think we're really clever, don't we? We think no one knows we're wearing a mask. But the thing is, if you go on a wholeness journey, they go, wow, mum and dad are less irritable. They're not fighting as much. There's mum doesn't seem to be as uptight, or she used to be scared and anxious about everything, but over this journey, she seems to be more settled and have more peace, and there may be some disruption in that. And I think it's probably a good opportunity to talk about something that we learnt about in economics. In fact, as we were planning the chat that I'm having on the couch with another couple of incredible ladies for our Sunday service, and it really will be worth a watch. Really excited about that too. But we talked about that economics idea of opportunity cost. That idea that, to pursue particular opportunities, there is always a felt cost. There's always, it's going to cost you something. But sometimes not paying the price is more expensive in the end.
Yeah. And often for people who are aware that they need to embark on a journey, they expend a lot of energy
just covering
trying to keep everything under control. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we think that embarking on this journey takes energy and courage, and it does, but it takes a huge amount of energy to not embark on it and make it look like all your ducks in a row and everything is fine. And, your children are pretty intuitive, really. They know when it's authentic and they know when it's inauthentic.
Yeah.
And so, if you're going to expend energy, you might as well expend it on making progress rather than just expending it on surviving.
Yeah.
Like, feeling like you're on a meaningful journey.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard, like, excuse the French, but sometimes clients say last year was crap.
Yeah.
And this year's been crap.
Yeah.
But at least I know what the crap is about.
Yeah, that's right.
And so
pain with purpose, we call that.
Pain with purpose, yeah. And so it's not that it's got any easier, but suddenly they've got insight and understanding. It was going to be crap anyway.
Yeah.
So, but at least now I'm on a journey of understanding, unpacking, learning different ways of coping. You're kind of going to pay one way or the other.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the choice, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the choice between slavery and freedom. I mean, let's not downplay the stakes here.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this is the story of salvation. I think we didn't really get to touch on it when we talked, but it's certainly in my mind going into our last conversation, is that picture of salvation in the Old Testament. It wasn't someone saying a prayer at the end of a service. It was actually a group of people having to find their identity in Christ, and that meant leaving Egypt and that identity as slaves, and every time they hit a wall going, I'll just go back to Egypt. Oh, why did you bring us out here, God? Was there not enough, room to bury our bodies back in Egypt? And these kind of cynical comments that their wrong story was telling them, it's going to end badly anyway, so it might as well have ended badly. At least it should have ended badly in my old abusive relationship with my fears and my pain and my whatever that was, whatever those things that are keeping people captive, those old thoughts, that wrong story, whatever. And then of course God was wanting to show them his faithfulness and make a way where there was no way, and bring water from a rock and manna in a wilderness, and then eventually take them on such a journey they could enter their promised land. But we kind of read that as being magical, but it just sounds painful to me. But the difference is, started in slavery but ended in freedom. And that's the kind of journey. And Egypt wasn't as nice as you remember it being.
Well, I was going to say, I'm just thinking, we tend to minimise things, don't we? Our past, or, people who've come through this journey might be sitting there when they're on the other side of it and they go, was it really that bad?
Spiritual amnesia,
because,
we call that.
Because they're in such a different space that they can't remember how bad it was. And like that, the garlic and onions of Egypt. And suddenly it seemed like it was, quite rosy, really. But they forget that they were, they were worked hard and many people died and it was, it was difficult. But we romanticise those things, and it's like, it was so much easier back there. And I remember saying that to God, it was so much better before you started picking at this.
Yeah.
But then when you're on the other end of it, it's like, there's no way to go back.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so much part of who you are. It's your journey. It's all of those things. And that's the thing. They're sitting there going, this is really hard work. I'm having to walk around the desert. So I should go back to bricks without straw. My goodness. I mean, the hard labour, the captivity, the demeaning nature of the relationship that they had with those around them. The tyranny, the fear that drove them. They forget that because they've become so familiar with that tyranny that they forgot that they were captives after all, because for them that had become normal life. And there's a lot of people probably watching us tonight sitting there maybe going, I know I need to go on a journey, but I really don't want to upset the apple cart. You say, actually, you're living with an upset apple cart. You're settling for less than God intended for you. And maybe there's some bumps that need to happen. And maybe a key word to those people tonight would be, maybe things won't be the same if you choose to embark on this journey. But that doesn't mean everything's going to fall apart and your kids are going to get ruined, and maybe it will look different from a season, and maybe you will need to step back from some stuff, and maybe you will have to give yourself some room in your emotional jar to put, maybe these are the big rocks in that season, and you need to clear some of your schedule so you can do this right. And in a sense, if you're a mum or a dad, this could be the best thing you could do for your children.
Kids, absolutely. I mean, you would attest to that. If I had not gone on the journey that I'd been on, what would this look like now?
Yeah.
The dysfunction that I would have continued to live out of.
Well, you wouldn't be bigger, you'd be better. And these are the decisions, isn't it? I mean, for me, that's a pastoral line for me. You can, if you keep doing the right things for the wrong reasons, you won't get bigger, you'll get better. But if you allow God to do that heart surgery and do the hard lines, you'll actually get bigger. And I tell you, man, I want to see more people get bigger, and we don't need to see any more church people get better. Because the biggest church in New Zealand is the people that don't fellowship. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we better keep moving.
Two more questions.
I hope this is helpful for people who are on the end of it here. There was one question, actually this probably fits in now. Someone said, is there affordable Christian counselling available in Timaru?
I think there's generally a lack of counsellors, even though I would say, to my great surprise, I would say there's probably at least 16 counsellors in Timaru. I only know that because I went to an ACC meeting and here was, apologies from all these people and the 9 or 7 people that turned up and 9 that couldn't come. It's like, for goodness sake, that's 16 counsellors and me. Unfortunately, I don't know that there's anything specifically around particularly a Christian counsellor. I know there's a couple of Christians who work as counsellors. There's one who works at the hospice. I won't name anybody here, but I'm aware of a couple of Christians who work. Unfortunately, counselling is a very expensive profession to be part of, especially if you are self-employed.
Well, you can only work, when you're doing that kind of work, you can't work 40 hours a week.
No, you can't.
But it's a 40-hour-a-week job.
It is, and so it's very hard. But I mean, if you find somebody that you, and I know with Connect, they've very kindly subsidised counselling for people. In the past, I've had a budget to work with people and I've had discretion around being able to do that.
Because we're committed to people getting whole. We're committed to people going on these journeys, and so that's something that we've done in a partnership with you and your business. It's called Co-Counselling now. I think you got redeemed and changed the name. So we've been invested in that. But also for people that where it's been trauma or past abuse that has caused some of their dysfunction, there's actually funding available for some of that stuff, isn't there?
Yep, there's
going to take a moment to talk about that, maybe for people watching.
Yep. Particularly with ACC, we're very blessed in this country to have a government who supports people who have experienced any kind of sexual trauma, and it's amazing. People come and it's like, no, nothing happened, as they begin to tell a story. There's things there that allow us to hook into using ACC. It's a non-proof. You don't have to prove that anything happened, and it's not about bending the rules or anything like that, but it's quite a wide scope for being able to access funding under ACC. There's criteria, of course, but it's quite a wide scope.
Yeah.
Because actually, for some people, maybe something particularly, it may not be major what has happened, but it's had a major impact on the person.
Yeah.
And for other people, there may have been an absolute major event, but they've, for whatever reason, they've been able to process that, and it hasn't had the huge impact. So it's not about, how bad or big it was. It's the impact that it's having on your life now and your ability to function day to day.
Yeah.
And that's quite easy to access. There's probably, as I say, I think there's probably 16 people in Timaru working. Unfortunately, we have an avalanche of this work in our country.
Yeah.
We're all run off our feet.
Yeah. And I'd say, for counsellors too, is that, for people watching about counselling, is that remembering that idea that you will value what costs you, and that actually if people invest, why not invest in yourself? We'd spend that money on a new bike or a TV subscription or a new frying pan, but this is something that can do so much more for us. So I really encourage people to invest in themselves, and sometimes that can feel, if you're a parent and you've got kids, you can kind of feel like that's selfish. Sometimes I know as a parent, spending money on myself is hard, but sometimes when it comes to your health and your well-being, that's sometimes the best money you can spend for the family. For the family. So, and
I've found, actually, a little bit of a sideline, but when I first went into counselling, because we've been in ministry for so long, you're in that helping profession, and so I decided that I would be really kind and see people quite cheap, and I found the people, interestingly enough, who I saw for the least were the ones who valued it the least.
Yeah, didn't turn up.
There's something in that, isn't there? Like what you were saying.
Yeah, you'll value what you invest in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Here's another one. How do I stop myself going into depression? I feel myself going into a dark place. I feel terrible because I know it's going to last for a prolonged period of time. This is obviously someone that struggles with depression. What would you advise to someone about? I know there's no silver bullet to that question. There's obviously a couple of all-round medication, but also maybe if you started with some healthy habits for people.
If this person has a history of depression, it's amazing how we can see the signs and almost give in to that. Like, oh, here we go, here's the cycle again. I know
it's coming, I can't stop it.
Yeah, a bit of that learned helplessness, eh?
Yeah.
Like, I know this is going to happen, and I know it's going to get really bad before it gets better. And I think, it's a little bit like, I use the analogy of a bonfire with anxiety, and all our loaded self-talk, like I can't cope with this is too much, I can't handle it, or our self-talk around our worth and value. Every time we have these thoughts, it's like putting another log on the bonfire.
Yeah.
And actually, we want to de-escalate that rather than escalate it. And I think our self-talk is incredibly important.
Yes.
I think our self-care is incredibly important. I think our connection and our narrative, the story that we're telling ourselves, is really important. Yeah. And I think seeking, medical advice. For some people, I've seen people dramatically getting on the right medication. Just because you're on medication doesn't mean it's the right medication. Interesting, depression. They've found that depression can be suppressed grief or anger.
Yes.
And it can manifest as depression. And
depression kind of gets thrown out there now, like it's kind of the mental health version of the common cold.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, you've got depression. But actually there's many different forms of depression. Yeah. And like you said, it could be suppressed trauma or grief or anger. All that stuff. And they would all have different treatments. And so it's important to sit down with someone that could potentially help you, someone in the professional field. I would say, just on top of that, from just my pastoral experience, and obviously I don't see people or address issues at the level that you would, Mum, as a trained counsellor, But I've found for some people, just perhaps if that's not been a medically diagnosed thing, or they don't have a history of it, but perhaps find themselves feeling down and have heard the word depression thrown around a lot or whatever, often just making sure you have regular exercise and doing things that naturally produce endorphins in your life, which naturally pick you up. That's your body's chemical strategy for keeping our energy up and our moods up. And the second one would be involved in something for someone else. Like that actually, we touched on that earlier, but that actually creates a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. I know for me, the kind of personality I am, and it's not everyone, but responsibility has always been the best catalyst for my growth and my inner health. I think I like me better when I have responsibility for others. I think that I live a more disciplined life. You give me not much to do for a long period of time, and I don't like me after a little while. I'm lazy, I'm ill-disciplined, all of that stuff. But having that external pressure sometimes, or that ability that someone else needs me, I need to do that. And that probably gets a lot of a bad rap these days when we talk about altruistic behaviour, but there's still so many positive forms of that.
Yep.
And that can be really helpful to us. So I guess it's about discerning right ways, and again, having good, trusted people that are ahead of the journey, counsellors available, doctors, all of that stuff. They can help us with that process.
And I think depression is about powerlessness too. You know, often when people come in and they're depressed and they start talking about their life, and it's like, okay, what are the things you can control?
Yeah.
Because often we focus on the things we have no control over.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's a futility in that, because, you know, if we were actually to stop and say, okay, what are the things, and it might be just simple things like that, like, okay, I can control whether I exercise, I can control whether I eat well, I can control whether I have structure in my life, I can control that I'm in meaningful relationships, I can control those things, but we just get so overwhelmed with the things that we can't control.
Yes.
And that is depressing.
Yeah. No, that's true. I'm just trying to find there was a question on Connect Church Timaru that would have been good, I think. I'm not sure if any more, it looks like no more have come through.
Yeah, there's another one.
Oh, is there?
Follow up from one of the earlier questions.
Yep.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go.
Are there people within the church who feel confident in walking alongside others who need to go on their journey but can't get to a counsellor? I figure that's part of what we're called to as a church. I know that a counsellor may have some benefits, but as you say, it's not necessarily easy for people to access, especially right now.
Yeah, I as someone who's speaking on behalf of Connect, I think, you know, I would say I think the heart and the intent is there, but sometimes we have expectations of others that aren't realistic. And so I think that would have to be managed. But I think in essence, to answer that question, the question is yes. I think there's a number of people that have been on these journeys and being plugged into a small group and things like that. Some of these things are being talked about, processed, celebrated. It's not always available that someone who's perhaps one of our leaders who's juggling multiple children, multiple responsibilities, has 10 hours a week to cry that through, to do all that stuff through with you. But certainly, you know, we've got a lot of our leaders and so many people even would be out of our kind of, I guess, official leadership structure that have been on these journeys that would love to know that if there's people that wanted to go on a journey that could offer some form of support. Would you like to talk to that more specifically from the counselling perspective?
Well, I think as we're creating a culture of people, it's okay to not be okay, and people are embarking on these journeys, at the end of that journey, they are then equipped to walk with somebody else, because they actually, there's nothing like kind of, we talk about empathy, and that's your ability to put yourself into somebody else's shoes. And that only comes from other people who've done that journey. You know, we can't possibly know what certain things are like. I think you said something the other day, I hope you don't mind me saying it, but you said, actually, I have a new empathy for people with mental health issues now, because, you know, some days I've been struggling with my mental health. But if you had never experienced that, you're like, well, I don't even get that. I don't, you know, like I can't walk with that person because I just don't get where they're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, you know, as we create an environment of this authentic journeying, you know, we are then people who have kind of done the hard yards, and that we then become those safe people who can journey with other people with not just an academic understanding, but an experiential understanding of what it is to, not just have a quick prayer or, somebody give you a scripture and saying, well, are you reading your word? And
have you got enough faith?
Yeah, and have you got enough faith? And, are you going to church? And, like we talk about those spiritual disciplines, they're really important. But, when we're in this situation, we want people who are actually just prepared to sit and hear us. And, I use that word validation, but there's something about people actually having a voice and feeling heard and not being judged and feeling understood. Like, oh, that's what counselling is. It just simply is people saying, oh, you get me.
Yeah.
You get me.
Yeah.
I don't have to try and tell you because you actually get it.
Yeah.
And there's something very, freeing about being able to talk to somebody who gets you. And so I think, as time goes by, and, I know there's significant people who've done significant journeys, and they're now equipped to walk with other people.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a trained counsellor, but I think it does take someone who's had some experience in doing that wholeness journey themselves, and being able to walk alongside somebody else.
And look, it's like salvation. Anyone that's genuinely experienced wants others to experience it. That's the natural outflow, isn't it? Once you've found something great, if you find a product that's changed all of your life, it's the best window cleaner or the best vacuum cleaner, you're like, hey, you tell people about it. Oh, you need to get one of these, especially you, Mum. Oh my goodness, you'll be on to everyone. Have you got these yet? It's changed my life, Everyone needs to get a David. Or, whatever.
No, we're not cloning him.
Yeah. It's true. So I think, 2 Timothy 2:2, entrust to faithful people who will entrust to faithful people who entrust to others. And that's the discipleship journey. And I sometimes think that people don't understand that actually once you've received it, you're not blessed to be blessed, but you're blessed to be a blessing. This is the mandate of God's people. One of my favourite illustrations of that from the Old Testament is you have the half tribe of Manasseh. You have is it Gad and Asher? It's like 2.5 tribes of Israel had their promised land on this side of the Jordan, on the desert side of the Jordan. They inherited it, and then as the rest of them went into promised land, they were like, "Oh, we've got our space now. We're good to go." And God came and clearly said to Joshua, He said, "The first people across the Jordan must be those 2.5, the fighting men from those 2.5 tribes, because it's the most Christian thing you can do is when you've got your victory is to go and fight for others who have yet to get theirs." And I just think that's such a compelling concept. They were like, "Oh, we've got ours here, so good luck the rest of you. Good luck the rest of you. Jump in there. It's going to be great." And He's like, "No, you have already tasted the goodness of God. Go and fight so others can taste for it as well." And I think that speaks to the evangelistic imperative of the church. But truly, those who have found, evangelists are something who have found something good and gone and told someone about it. And I think the same applies to these journeys.
Yeah. And I just want to say too, I wouldn't get too hung up on the Christian counsellor thing, because any counsellor who is worth their salt will work from your perspective. They will value and respect your perspective and work from your perspective.
So be honest about, you can see a good non-Christian counsellor say, "I'm a person of faith is the narrative of my life." And so a good counsellor will refer back to that. What does your faith say about that?
Absolutely.
And so you can fall into the trap of thinking a non-Christian counsellor is bad and a Christian counsellor is good. And that would be a fatal...
It would be.
Because not every Christian counsellor is a good counsellor. Hey, we've got a question here. It says, how do you foresee churches needing to change in a post-COVID world? There'll be an awful lot of anxious, lonely, fearful, jobless and stressed people. How do we become change makers in our communities? It's just a small question. Mental problems are often something we think we can pray away or cast out instead of doing the hard yards with people. These people are often not going to walk into a church and may have connected online via the internet.
Yeah.
So should we have a bit of a conversation about that? Some of that we probably will have already talked about. We've talked a lot about journeys and process and not just praying things away. But let's focus on how church could change. There's going to be some vulnerable people. What do you think some of the positive changes or some of the positive changes that need to come? Obviously, I'll have a crack at this too, because I'm thinking about that as a leader of the community and thinking about what we will take out of as a church what we'll take out of COVID and move forward. But what's your thoughts if you want to get the ball rolling?
Well, I don't know that the mandate has changed very much. For me, I think, you know, any time we encounter need, or we encounter people who are broken, or people who are in pain, or experiencing difficulty or financial distress or anything, we are the answer.
Yeah.
So, you know, it doesn't matter to me. It feels like nothing's changed. And, you know, as I was reading that question, I was thinking about that person who, you know, I found the two children sitting in the middle of the road, you know, and we don't have to go looking for opportunities to bring the kingdom. Those opportunities usually present themselves to us.
There's so much brokenness around us, right?
That's right. And if we've got more people who are feeling like that, and more people who are out of work, you know, as a community, the community is made up of individuals. And as we ask God to direct us, who would you have me, you know, minister to today? And I had a lovely thing happen on Mother's Day. Just a girl that I had been working with, her mum was a drug addict, and she has struggled with drug addiction, and she's just come into my world. She's just come across my path, and God's given me opportunities to just bless in really practical ways and just show that I care. And several times I've turned up when significant things have just happened in her world and I haven't known about, and God's just directed me to go there. And on Mother's Day, I get this lovely Happy Mother's Day from her.
Wow.
With hearts on it, and thank you so much. And that's the kingdom.
Yeah.
That is bringing the kingdom.
Yes.
So for me, the mandate hasn't changed. It doesn't matter where we are. When we encounter people in need, or who are feeling life is difficult for them, you know, we are the answer.
Yeah. Don't pray prayers you're not prepared to be part of the answer for, right? And if we're going to pray for revival, we need to be prepared to put our sleeves up and actually get in and see and do our best with the need that's in front of us, with the means that have been entrusted to us.
Yeah. And I often think, wouldn't it be amazing? And I think this, and I don't mean to sound proud when I say it, but I would like to think that every person I encounter, their life has been enriched in some way because our lives are rubbed up against each other.
Yeah.
And amazing, you think a community of people out there rubbing up against other people, and their lives become better because we're involved, or we as a church are involved in their lives. If that adds to their life, then that's bringing kingdom.
Yeah. And really the gospel, you know, it's called, the gospel is just simply the word for good news.
Yeah.
And when we accept the good news, it should be good news for our neighbours that we've accepted the good news, right?
So I think we've got to be careful we don't look to programs or things to change that. You know, the statistics are that people come into church through relationship, through encountering relationship with somebody who's caring, who's supportive, and who loves them unconditionally. That's how we're going to lead people to Christ. Not through running programs, not through by buying buildings. You know, it's actually by being that salt and light out there, each one of us, part of community, engaging with community.
Saying some of our team today about buying a building, and how, you know, for us, this has actually just been another signpost of God's faithfulness. But for us, we don't see buying a building as taking ground for the kingdom, because the real estate of kingdom is hearts. Yeah. The real estate of the kingdom is hearts. That's where God sets up shop. He doesn't set up shop in tangible real estate. The real estate of the kingdom of God is our hearts and our lives. And so we want to be part of that. We want to be part of the expansion of that. Like for me, my answer to this about how should the church change, I think why it's so important that we don't define our Christianity by our methodology, but it's the being faithful with this gospel and finding its appropriate expression for every season. And in different seasons, the needs are different. And the person who's asked that question has pointed out rightly that the normal we're going into is not the same normal that it was 6 months ago, and there's going to be there'll be different struggles, and there'll be different common struggles that, you know, will be new and fresh and challenges for this season. But what I love about something I actually saw N.T. Wright, he's just put out a book called The Pandemic and the Church. And he said he didn't want to comment on it because there's so many people going crazy about it on social media. He didn't want to say anything, but we're really excited to write it. And he's used the wisdom literature to talk about what it is to be the people of God. He's used the Old Testament prophets. He's used Jesus' life, and then he's used the church. And he said, always the response to a crisis or a pandemic or a change in situation where significant need arises as a result. the church's response has always been the same. What are the needs? What can we do? And who can we send? They weren't looking for the signs and the stars, for the mark of the beast and all of that kind of stuff. What they were looking for is, how can we be a faithful presence to the God we know revealed in Jesus? What would it look like for us to be that community in this situation? And so that person is rightfully recognise that we need to go in mindful. And the church is not the leadership, it's not the pastors, it's every person watching this. It's every person who would say they have a faith is sitting there and going, Lord, give me eyes to see, to pray the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Help me to love more than I focus on being loved. Help me to serve rather than focus on being served. God, give me eyes to see the needs around me so that I can be your agent in that situation today. And if people are feeling anxious and stressed, God, help me to make sure I am not the Levi and the priest who are too busy to stop and hear the person who just needs someone to listen. And I think, we can think of church as organised church, but we are the church. Yeah. And if we could do that and take even that person's insight who's forward thinking and going, right, there's some fresh challenges for the church. Let's roll up our sleeves. One of our mantras or thing is we're the church that rolls up our sleeves on Monday and celebrates on Sunday. And we come and talk about how God's used us. That's my dream for the church. And maybe we're going to have to be more listening ears, and maybe we will collaborate. And if there was increased mental health need, we would be able to work together or pool our resources and be able to provide some fundamentally helpful social services or whatever. And all of those things are in our heart to do, but it certainly corporate change starts with personal responsibility. And if all of us sit there and go, God, would you use me today? We pray not just prayers of faith, but prayers of formation. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. God, today, as I've prayed this prayer, I've been reminded that it's my job to participate today in bringing heaven to earth. Help me to be that person, the person who is quick to forgive so that I can receive forgiveness, the God who provides my daily bread, and maybe more than enough so I can provide for someone else who doesn't know you yet. I can be a royal priest, part of a holy nation, and I can minister all the bounties of the richness of your love and your mercy and your grace, and I can minister that to someone. If that's speaking a word of peace or praying a prayer for someone who's feeling anxious, then, it's all inclusive of those things. And if the church thinks it does a couple of particular, we do youth ministry on a Friday night and we do kids ministry on a Sunday morning and we preach a sermon, those things are expressions of the church, but they are not the church itself, because the church is always asking, what are the needs? How can we help? Who can we send?
But even a forum like this is something that's changed as a result of COVID too.
Yeah.
So it's already adapting to.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of people who perhaps wouldn't darken the door of a church who are actually logging in and listening to some of this stuff. So, the church has already adapted.
Yeah. And Connect at Home's going for one more week, those of you who are watching, and then it's going to change to Connect Online, as we realise that for us, church is always grounded in community. And so we want anyone who can make it back to actual connection. Connect at Home was our primary, time of gathering in our own homes and sitting under a message and encouragement. But for us, there will be an ongoing ministry of Connect Church called Connect Online, and it will be an encouraging ministry for those who perhaps can't access church, but we'll be encouraging those who can to jump into our tangible services. So you're right, we will continue to have that as a ministry.
And in answer to that question too, I guess, as time goes on, as leadership identify that there's specific areas that people are really struggling with, and there's no reason why we can't look at resourcing that.
Yep.
And doing even something like this where, you can do a podcast on anxiety, you can do a podcast on some things that just give people some tools. But truth is truth. There's a lot of stuff you can Google. You don't necessarily need to go to a counsellor. There's a lot of stuff you can get really good sound advice on anxiety and depression and things like that, and good self-care strategies and all that sort of stuff. So you don't,
on Wednesday we'll be publishing a Zoom interview with me and Pastor Steve Quinn, our Devonport campus pastor, who's also a trained counsellor.
Oh, he's training.
And training, and he's on his last paper. I think,
oh wow!
Yeah.
Good
But he's beginning to practice with his diploma, and we're just talking about just practical things people can do to deal with change, and so we are thinking about that pastorally as a team, and we're really fortunate to have one almost qualified counsellor, one who's in there as part of our team, and it's something that we really value, and we'll be looking to mobilise these guys in general ways too, and doing things like this, like you said. So, to our beautiful producers, any questions have come through? Are we signing off now? We could probably do that. Our time is probably up. We're an hour and a quarter. I really hope this has been a blessing for you tonight. I am just so grateful. You can see how blessed I am to have grown up in a home like this, with this kind of wisdom, and we're hopefully just trying to carry on that legacy. But tonight in our conversation, I hope that's been a blessing to you. I hope it's answered some questions. I hope it's got you asking yourself some questions as you think about faithfully stewarding the next season of our journey as Christians in this nation, and not just projecting what the church should do, but also personally accepting the responsibility of being members of that church and making sure that we all play our part, whether it's deciding whether you need to take some step back from busyness so you can do some business with God, or whether it's realizing that actually it's time for you to not just looking after you and to step into something that's going to bless someone else. Both of those are healthy in the right time, in the right place, in the right season. We love you. We are so looking forward to gathering back with you, and we may do one of these at another time. I've enjoyed it. I hope it's been a blessing to you, and we will sign off and look forward to celebrating all God's doing in the lives of our people, our new building, and all that is to come. Good night.
God bless you. Bye.